Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ Namasāmi. So those of us who are gathered at the monastery this evening have a special interest to study and practice the Buddha's teachings, presumably. And one of the outlines in the tradition is that there's the study, the practice, and the realization. I'll impress you with my Pali, patipat. No. So I won't impress you. Pariyat, patipat, pativet. They need to go together, you see, because some people, they just think, all we have to do is study. They just have to read the books about it. But of course, we are the little bit more advanced group. We really have to practice as well in order to have the realization. And on one hand, you can say the study is, one hand is easier. You can sort of pick up a book and read about the basic principles, and fortunately the Buddhist teachings nowadays anyway is quite clearly explained. I remember when I was early, 50, well, not 50 years ago, nearly 50 years ago, when I was interested in Buddhism. There were there's various books around, but unfortunately, many of them were not very well written. They were by people who were not practitioners, people who didn't have the in-depth experiences of practice or even living the monastic life, living in the monastery. And so there was some very strange interpretations. And sometimes they had to depend upon also very, very bad translations. So they get mixed up between Buddhism and Hinduism, and so it was a bit hard to find your way, But I had a certain, I don't know what it was, a certain appreciation that in order to study something like Buddhism, you have to go to the source. You have to go to a Buddhist country. So that gave me the inspiration to go and travel to a Buddhist country to be able to practice there. And I remember when I first arrived in the first Buddhist country I arrived in was Sri Lanka. And I've been traveling through Christian countries, through Europe, Christian countries. Then went to Israel, Jewish country, went to Arab countries, or Muslim countries. Then India, Hindu country. When I arrived in Sri Lanka, I suddenly felt, I've come home somehow. This environment seems to be sort of quite familiar somehow. Somebody said, well, you were probably a Buddhist in your past life, You're a failed monk, Got to come back and try again. Or something. But I remember all my travels, even though a lot of the people, they were not very religious necessarily, but the religion really had a strong influence in the culture. I went to Germany first, and mostly Protestant, at least North Germany. Very, it sets the tone for the culture of the place. The Protestant work ethic, very efficient and very work conscious. Then went to Italy, and Catholic, very, very different. Lots of ceremony and rituals and beautiful cathedrals and lots of people praying and going to the church. I was going to say temple, going to the church. Then Greece, another Greek Orthodox, different again. Not to mention Israel and the Muslim countries, and then India. Although India could appreciate, the great, more like the tolerance, the great tolerance there. You can do anything, any kind of spiritual practice. Very, very open. Everybody had appreciation of spiritual practice, but I was so confused. And then I read somewhere later, somebody said, there's a God for every Hindu. Everybody has their own, God or practice to follow or something. Which is too much for me. I need some kind of guidelines. And so, coming to Sri Lanka, Buddhist country, there was, the Buddhist teachings on one level, especially Theravada, are very, you can say, rational, logical, as far as it goes. But that's not the end of it. It's not just a philosophy. We have to practice too. And they were, people were very encouraging, even in Sri Lanka, which is not necessarily very strong on meditation practice. Sri Lanka is very strong on the scholarly studies, but they were very inviting. Yes, come and study here, and come and you can do some meditation if you want. And of course, coming from Western culture, study was about the main thing. There was very little emphasis. I mean, in those days, there were a few people going around teaching, who did mention a bit about meditation. I went to a lecture at the university from a man called Alan Watts. He was in the Zen tradition, sort of popularizing Zen tradition, and he talked a lot about meditating monks. But normally, in a Western culture, you have to study. You just have to study the books and learn about it, and actually even practicing it. If you're practicing the religion, for example, like Buddhism, you're not very objective. You see, you're already a little bit wishy-washy because you're one of the converted. You see. So you can't really be objective and look at the facts, you see. So it was not too often that there were, practicing Buddhists who were scholars. But then, I recognized the necessity for practice, at least practice as calming down the mind anyway. It's too much thinking, and after a while, the thinking at a certain stage, it's helpful in the beginning to know what you're doing, but then, if you aren't able to look after your mind, we say, raksa chit, aren't able to take care of your mind, the thinking can take off, begins to obsess you, and you can't stop thinking. You're trying to think to solve your problems. You have emotional problems and trying to think your way to solve the emotional problem, but emotion is not a thought. The thought can't reach the emotion. So, what to do? Watch the breath. At least as a starting point anyway. Calm down the emotions. And then when one's emotions calm down, then there's a possibility to observe them more clearly, to be able to see what the nature of these emotions are, rather than to figure them out with thinking in the brain. But it does require, I would say, some degree of study first. Even Lumpur Cha, he was as a young monk. The standard vocation of a young monk is to go to the monastery and study. They have the Naktam, what do you call that? Naktam is what? Basic Dhamma studies, I guess. So when he was a young monk, he was a study monk in the beginning. And he traveled around he had to go to different monasteries where they had more advanced teachers. And then he got an interest to also study meditation. But his main emphasis in the early days was study. And that became a little bit of a real crisis for him, actually. Those who read his biography. Anybody read his biography? Has everybody read his biography? The book is
bits and pieces.
The book is here.
Yeah. Stillness flowing. Okay.
Yeah.
Stillness flowing.
It's about that thick. But I haven't read it either. But I translated the first Ajahn Chah biography.
Right.
Yeah, from Thai. It was a little bit. How would I put it? It was a bit flowery, very, very flowery. The translation, the biography of Ajahn Chah was written by one of his disciples. It's more like a hagiography. When there was some kind of special event, like Ajahn Chah had these subin nimit, auspicious dreams, and then of course the biographer, I guess he'd say, "Oh, isn't Ajahn Chah wonderful? He's had this wonderful vision or a dream or something. Isn't he wonderful? He's a great Ajahn. So I cut that out. I just wanted the bare facts, just the bare information, about his life. But a real crisis came when, there's two crises. I mean, maybe many crises, but one of the crises was that he was still very much involved as a study monk. And then he heard about Ajahn Mun up in northeast Thailand, the great meditation teacher. So he had this kind of conflict in his mind about, if you study, he was studying the Visuddhimagga. Have you ever heard of that? It's almost as thick as the Ajahn Stillness Flowing book. It's a really thick book, but it's not of stories. It's the compilation of the Buddha's teachings, kind of summarized in one big thick book, you see, by Acharya Buddhaghosa. So this is sort of like it's one of the easier books to read, I guess, rather than the whole of the Pali Canon, which I think probably in Ajahn Chah's early life, it wasn't translated into Thai yet. It was still in Pali, so he couldn't read Pali well enough to read the whole of the Buddhist scriptures, so he read this book, which was a summary of it. But anyway, it's a great big thick book, so my goodness, how can you understand and learn all that? So he was feeling a little bit disillusioned, or he's feeling a little bit stressed out. How can I learn all this? This, I don't know how many pages, but it's a lot. A lot of information just to read through. Anyway, he walked all the way from Bangkok all the way up to Sakalnakhon in northeast Thailand. I don't know, maybe it's 500 kilometers, 600 kilometers or something other. He walked through the jungles in those days, you see, on Tudong. And walking through the jungles, you only do 20 kilometers a day or something, so how long is that?
25 days.
Took him a month or so anyway, walking. Anyway, he finally met Ajahn Mun, and so he could talk to him. He had an interview with him. And so he asked Ajahn Mun, how can we understand all this Buddhist teaching? It's a great big thick book like this, There's all about sila and samadhi and panya, just the samadhi section. 40 different meditation objects to study and practice, So how can you do that? It seems to be impossible. Ajahn Mun just said, it all comes from one place, in your own heart. The study is, just all over the place. It's huge, but it all comes from one place, right in your heart. So all you have to do is look in your heart. And you find the source, you see. But they never teach you that at university, Give you another book to read. You read this book, You read another book, and then you get your bachelor degree, then another book, and another master's degree and PhD, and then I read some books by some of these students, PhD students. They write about some aspect of Buddhism, and then it says, the author now is a professor and so, and and the book is all wrong, you know. They got their PhD thesis wrong, but they're now their professor teaching about this wrong aspect of Buddhism, but, you know. And they have some good points, I'm sure, you know, they have a lot of information in their mind, but they don't know the right source. Yeah, they're pointing out the information here and there, and they obviously hadn't brought it back to their own mind again, their own heart, you know. Then there were other, you know, things I read about, other like most of the books written by scholars. So there's some of them are written about, you know, aspects of the monastic life, and I obviously recognize they haven't been monks before. They got that one all wrong. No. But we're fortunate these days that there are some books around, you know, and like on my computer, for example. I'm still writing it. And maybe I won't finish it because, you know, this is one about very, very profound topic, anatta, which I guess you could say really to really understand anatta, one has to be, you know, an hour hunt, you know. So I guess I will never finish it. Not this lifetime, maybe. But maybe it takes a little bit of a different approach when we come to the practice. You know, like learning, study. It's usually, you know, at a distance. You know, I'm learning about that information there. Whereas practice, it's looking at your own mind. You know, not just keeping a step back and observe and being the observer of it, but you're the experiencer of it, experiencing your own mind. You see. You know, and it's a bit hard sometimes to be able to, you know, to be the observer, you know what's going on in your mind and not get pulled into it, you know. You're experiencing it, but you're trying to understand it, trying to be the observer, the puru, the one who knows it, you see. But that's the only way that one arrives at direct experience. You know, and we can know all the information, like Ajahn Chah says. You know, you can look in the dictionary and you can find the word, what the dictionary says about anger, for example. You know, the dictionary says this is anger. It's like this and this and this. But look in your own mind about anger. Huh? Look at your own anger. Oh, can you do that? Can you observe your own anger? Yeah. I mean, do you have anger? I mean. I mean, it takes quite a bit of humility, I think, even to recognize, acknowledge that you have it, in the first place, you know. Many people just refuse to even acknowledge it. But I'm not angry. No. I'm a peaceful, you know, metta spreading Buddhist, you know. I don't have anger. No, not me. But you can see the difference, isn't it, between looking in the dictionary, you know, oh, there's anger out there. See, there's this funny explanation here, you know, and then observing it in your own mind, you know, observing that experience in your own mind. Yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? And sometimes you get pulled into it. Yeah, it does happen sometimes. You know, but at least you're the wiser for it. You know, oh, that's what anger's like, you know. And we know that, oh yes, sometimes it is overpowering, overwhelming, you know, and it is dangerous. It does have this other disadvantages and dangers to it. Yeah. And it's a very, very valuable lesson to learn that. You know, whereas, you know, when you look in the dictionary, you can say you're on safe ground. Oh yes. Very interesting, anger, yes, very interesting. Yes. Nice to know all about it, yes, but not me. It's not my experience. And it's important, I mean, the most important part of it is that we understand our own type of anger, you could say. Our own particular brand of it, you know, and the particular, cause and effect relationships. What's triggering it off? Where's the borderline between the impression, the sensory impression, for example, and the stimulus, and then whether it is irritation, annoyance, whether it is anger or hatred or whatever. It's important to know that. Whereas just knowing the information about it, not very is usually. I don't know how big the explanation of anger is in the dictionary. It might be just a few paragraphs or so, But when you look in your own heart, you say, "Oh my goodness, it's not a few paragraphs. That's a whole lifetime." there's a lot of stuff there. And it'll continue for many lifetimes unless you really get down to the real source of it. If it can only be just in a few paragraphs, it'd be easy, but it's a whole lifetime experience. Greed, aversion, delusion, some of these major themes in our life. So, Ajahn Chah kept his kind of, one of his frequent sayings was, you have to kind of bring it inside all the time. Yes, it's helpful to know the information, like you listen to the Dhamma talk, for example, but most important to bring it inside again. And one of his teachings he often said was about listen with your heart. How I understand that is that you listen and you see what strikes your heart. Because some of the things you hear maybe or read about, it doesn't really hit home. It isn't really relevant to us, if you like. It's not relevant to us maybe right now, but perhaps later. But if you notice something in your heart, oh yeah, strikes a chord, either positive or negative, doesn't really matter, but something does resonate or does kind of reverberate in your heart, then it must be, and it's very relevant. And so after Ajahn Chah's, after he had this meeting with Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Mun pointing at his heart, then I would say that was a real turning point. Ajahn Chah then became a meditator after that. Previously, he was still very much involved with studying, and of course, it does have a place in the teachings, as I said, the pariyat. I got that right now. Pariyat, patipat, pativet. But one has to know how much to study. The information you can spend your whole lifetime, many lifetimes studying, and never getting around to the practice. But other times, some degree of study is helpful to know what the direction of practice is. It's like looking at your GPS coordinates, or looking at the map to know roughly where you're going. And then when you're practicing, do also sometimes you have the information to have some checks and balances. And sometimes this comes from the scriptures themselves, sometimes by talking with a teacher, getting some guidance from a teacher. There are some people I know, they've been practicing for 20 years, and still doing the same thing. Mostly people learn, at least in the Western countries anyway, people learn meditation as an exercise in concentration. And you have to be observing your breathing. And many people, they benefit from that, definitely. But they don't understand that the Buddha's teaching samatha, vipassana, 2 parts. The calming of the mind is only the first step. When the mind calms down enough, can be the right environment for investigation. Investigate the nature of your own particular physical sensations, feeling tones, states of mind. And of course, many times it's not so easy. If your mind is calmed down, oh, wonderful. Oh, who wants to look at your greed, aversion, delusion now? Huh? No thanks. Back to the breath. And it is, in a way, it does have results, it does have benefits, but it's only part of the practice. Unless people know something about, Buddhist teachings, they can get kind of, say, marooned. They just get marooned on this island of tranquility. And I've met people, my experiences in different monasteries, I've met people who are, one of the dangers is that you're good at concentration. You can do concentration very easily. There was one person I knew, they could, sit for hours and hours. They loved to come to the all-night vigils, and they'd come in and sit there for 5 hours. And yet, it was very impressive. I mean, even envious, enviable, sit there for 5 hours. But but I knew this person, and their personal life was a disaster. They had all these problems in their life. And because they were good at samadhi, concentration, they would just escape into concentration. They never solved their problems in their life. They just go to the monastery and at least, maybe if they didn't do that, they might become a drug addict or something. I don't know. Samadhi drug is safer, just breaks your knees. And I'm sure they must have heard, teachings in the monasteries about insight meditation, contemplation, reflection, but maybe they were too deeply in their concentration and didn't even hear it. They just totally blissed out. And they were quite good at it, and they could escape into it, And they were so good at this concentration that there was one monk came to visit, and he recognized this person's abilities with concentration. And probably, maybe some of you know that if you have good concentration, they say if you can develop up to the fourth absorption, fourth jhana, then you get psychic powers. Maybe I shouldn't tell you. You might want to get it. Greed. So this monk recognized this person had this ability with concentration. So he wanted to advise them how to develop psychic powers. And I said, that's the last thing you should do. Here she can't even get her life together. And you want to teach her supernormal powers as well? She'd really go crazy. Until you get your life together and are really reasonably grounded, don't think about psychic powers, boy. They complicate your life. But Ajahn Chah, after he met with Ajahn Mun, then he recognized the value, the importance of practice. And sometimes when I was staying with him, he was becoming more popular with people from Bangkok, educated people. So one of his sayings he often repeated he said, "Close your books and read your mind." That was mainly for the young people, the younger people, who are mostly well-educated people, always looking for answers in books. Close your books and read your mind. So it sounded sometimes like he maybe was, anti-intellectual or something. But that's not how I understood it. He was just trying to give people the right emphasis first. They were so addicted to or so familiar with reading books to find the answer, they didn't know how to look at their own mind, how to read their own mind. But once we learned that lesson, how to read your own mind, then you can open the book. And you don't expect to find the answer in the book. You open the book and it gives you some information, it gives you some knowledge, and you can use that from the point of view of observing your own mind. How does your mind relate to that information, that knowledge then? Is this useful knowledge? Is it just distracting you? Is it even confusing you? But you're coming from the point of view of reading your own mind, you see. Yeah, so some people, I remember there was one of the monks in what Nanachat, and I think even before he went to live there, maybe he'd already stayed there a few years already, but after he had 5 vasa, he went traveling to visit other teachers, and he went down south to visit Ajahn Buddhadasa. You heard of Ajahn Buddhadasa, yeah, he's also one of the very famous, well-known monks in Thailand, and this monk was he was quite intellectual, I would say. So he asked Ajahn Buddhadasa. He said, I would like to study Abhidhamma, he said. This monk said to Ajahn Buddhadasa, I'd like to study Abhidhamma. And then Ajahn Buddhadasa said, well, let's look at this word, Abhidhamma. What does it mean, Abhidhamma? He says, Dhamma, yes. And Abhi means too much. Too much Dhamma. And I think, I don't know if that's what the Abhi means in Pali. I don't think so. But I think Ajahn Buddhadasa realized the temperament of this monk, you see, that he was already intellectually inclined. So for him to study Abhidhamma, his head would explode probably, too much thinking. So when he told, too much Dhamma, then, right, I get the message, he said. Study more Dhamma, not Abhidhamma. Just study Dhamma, keep it simple. So we went further south and stayed with Ajahn Jamnian, I think, the meditation teacher in down south, before returning to Wat Nanachat. But after Ajahn Chah recognized the value of practice, then he spent many years, I think 7 or 8 years, just wandering around northeast Thailand, finding quiet places to practice in. He had quite a few strange experiences. Those who have been to Wat Pa Pong, they have some murals there are these ceramic murals in the boat. They posted a hole about some of Ajahn Chah's strange. He walked on this path one time and he saw this body of a snake, great big snake like this, but he couldn't see the head or the tail, you see. So he knew it was long. I saw one up in Phetchabun a few years ago too, and just great big black snake. All I saw was the body like this big around. I didn't get too close. Could have eaten me, I think. I was so fat. But then, the practice, once one has understanding the benefit and the value of practice, and it's a matter of trying to find the opportunities to keep up with the practice too. It's so much easier to, just pick up a book, or nowadays so many people, they listen to Dhamma talks, and just rather than read their own mind, they listen to Dhamma talk. And, it has its values, but, if we're always listening to other people's experience, other people's interpretations, we don't learn to read our own mind. If you have this basis of reading your own mind, then you can listen to other people's experiences, and maybe you have something, some particular way of practice or a particular technique they've used. Oh, that sounds helpful, for me, my particular way of practice too. Yeah. So you're still observing it. You're still observing through your own mind. Other times, some of the other teachers, it can be very inspiring, but doesn't relate to you in your practice. There are some people who, they have, you can say, different temperaments. There's some people, we say in the tradition, there's some, dosa charita. Dosa charita, that. That's the anger temperament. You see. Yeah, so maybe if you're inclined in that direction, maybe listening to their ways of practice can be helpful. Maybe you find some particular ways to practice, particular techniques that they've used, which you can find useful for your own practice. But if it's not isn't your temperament, well, it's just it's can be inspiring sometimes, but it's more helpful to listen to teachings or read teachings that you can use for your own practice. Will help you develop your own practice, deeper levels. Of course, we all have some degree of greed, aversion, delusion, but we each have our own specialties too. And maybe different times also in your practice, particular problems come up, and we can try. I think first of all, it's important to try the basic practices the Buddha outlines in the scriptures. He gives some general guidelines for all the different hindrances and the different defilements. Yeah. Then maybe we have to be a bit more creative ourselves too. Then other times maybe it's helpful to seek out some teachers, some advice from teachers who can give you some other more personalized advice, for example. Like when I went to I was in Thailand first of all mostly on my own, and practicing for 2.5 years, and then I realized that I couldn't speak Thai well enough to talk to the Thai teachers, but and I couldn't explain to them well enough, what the issues were, but sometimes when I had to rely upon my own investigations, my own you can say questioning myself, and sometimes I realized that just by trying to find out what the actual question was, what's really the issue anyway. You have some problem and I want to solve it. Yeah, but you only can solve the problem by finding out the real source of it, and not just getting rid of it, but you have to go to the source of it. So you inquire in your own mind, okay, what is the real issue here anyway? What is it? Is this aversion? Yeah, is it issue with aversion? Or is it fear? Or is it doubt? And sometimes there is, a whole series of different, we're aware of one level of the problem, but we look more deeply, there's something else behind it. Yeah. So we can inquire more carefully into our own issues that are coming up, rather than just running off to somebody, some other teacher, that asks for advice or asks for the answer. We ask ourselves, what's this real issue anyway? What is it? Trying to look more carefully, more closely. And sometimes you do that. A few times I noticed when I was able to really be clear what the issue was. What is the issue anyway? As soon as I was clear what the issue was, it was resolved. Well, the answer was there. Because one is doing that through clarity, through investigation and clarity. And then if some teacher had given you the answer, you wouldn't have the same degree of insight. So, oh yeah, right, yeah. But if you have to do it yourself, you not only have the particular methods to observe, you develop the clarity of mind, you know the technique, how to use it, but you resolve it yourself. That's a particular issue that I'm having, particular quality of it, the particular kind of it I'm having. It was easy, like for example, sometime with Ajahn Chah, having him there, the great teacher, you see. You say, I have a problem, I'll just go and ask him. But he was a very wise teacher. So many times if you came to him with a question, you wanted him to give you the answer, he'd say, well, I don't know, what do you think? Or, go look at it again. He wouldn't play that role of giving you an easy answer, you see. He'd leave it to you to figure out, you to sort out. But if somebody was really lost and they're really confused, and he would give them some little guidance, some support, some guidance. Oh, maybe you should try this. Try this practice. But if somebody was reasonably stable in the practice, and say, well, look again, try harder, and just encourage people to find, to answer their own questions, not be dependent upon a teacher all the time. And then one gains the proficiency, how to solve one's own problems. You could say, be one's own teacher, if you like. Be independent of the teacher. If you become dependent upon a teacher, like Ajahn Chah, for example, could sit there. I remember, sitting to listening to his talks, for example, and it'd be so inspiring. He'd be sitting there giving his talks, and he'd be full of energy. And I remember one time it was I think before the Vasa, so he would be sitting underneath his hut, you see, and sort of talking to different people, and I could sit there all night and listen to him talk and just have so much energy. But one night I went there to sit there and listen to him talk, and maybe about 6 o'clock he says, okay, that's enough for tonight. Everybody go back and meditate in your own kuti, he said. So, disappointing. I came there for the show, and he's called an early night. So anyway, so we all got up. We started walking to my hut, my kuti in the forest. And the further I got away from Ajahn Chah's hut, the more tired I felt. Got to my kuti and fell asleep at 6:30. And I realized I'm feeding off his energy. I'm feeding off his charisma. That's dangerous, because he won't be there forever, and he's not. He died too, So we're dependent upon his charisma to keep you going in your practice, and he's gone. You're really lost, you see. But he was quite aware of that possibility too. So anybody became too dependent upon him, or became too dependent or too close to him, he would send him off to some branch monastery somewhere, some Gandhan branch monastery, Sun Glue or something, some poverty-stricken branch monastery where all they got is sticky rice and bananas. And if you can endure that, then you're okay. Or if you start to fall apart, then you go back to the main monastery and they give you some encouragement and send you back again. But that's really what the practice is about. The practice is, you can say, in a very simple way, struggling. We hear about, you read the books and it's about, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, enlightenment, right? 4 steps, huh? Just Magapala, the path and the fruit, Seems so simple, huh? Just practice the Eightfold Path and then you're enlightened. Oh, yeah, right. But then you sit here and look at your own mind, and what do you see? Where's the Eightfold Path again? Can't see the first step even. Sometimes. When it comes to your own experience, then it takes some perseverance, some continuity. But if we just expect to open the book and find all the answers right there, on the page, it's not the same. But the more that we observe these particular experiences, you notice when your mind is wandering off the breathing. That's a very valuable exercise. It's very, very important to learn that. Just sit there. I remember one teacher in North Thailand, and he wrote some books in Thai, and so he asked me to translate them to English because he wanted to go teaching in the Western countries. So he gave me this book to translate, and this teacher was very good at samadhi practice, you see. So he gave me this book to translate, and the very first paragraph was, you sit down, cross your legs, watch your breath, you go into the white light, you listen to the celestial music. That was the first paragraph. I said, I can't translate this. I can just see somebody sitting in some flat somewhere in London reading this. Cross your legs, go into the white light, and float away. And for him, he was very, very gifted at samadhi, so as he could do that. but the average person, that isn't how their practice is. You sit down, cross your legs, try and watch your breath, and your mind and you fall asleep. Watch your breath, start thinking about breakfast tomorrow morning. But it's important to know that, know what, to read your own mind, you see. Yeah. And even though, you can say, in a way, the study is quite simple, there it is, usually the Buddha explains, the path of practice and the result, nibbana, right? Yeah. But when you're practicing yourself, it's very hard to see nibbana sometimes, if at all. But as we persevere with the practice, it's more like it comes into focus. Observing these particular characteristics of the mind. Oh, that's what the mind is doing. Yes, yes. And then we have the possibility to find ways to train the mind. Yes. It's not doing that. We don't just look in the book, Sila Samadhi Panya Nibbana. It's, oh yes, we learn the real lesson. We learn the way how to practice with this mind, at this time, whatever's happening. And it's a lesson which is relevant to us, each one of us. The Buddha said it's to be realized, each person for themselves. So we have the guidance of the learning, the study part of it, but the practice is the most important part. And the practice, we do the practice, bit of study, the practice, and then sometimes we recognize pativet, realization, moments where the mind does calm down, when there is moments of insight and clarity. And the more we practice, basically, the more the results are. More often the results happen. More clarity of mind. But we can't say when, because it is unconditioned. It's not the condition, it's the unconditioned. So keep up with the practice and we see the results for ourselves. Then we have the right appreciation of the practice and everything becomes part of the practice. And particularly failure. Not just success, failure too. That's the most valuable part of the practice. And when we're failing, that's when the ego is really humbled. Yeah. If we could all just sit down and be enlightened, we'd have a pretty big ego, I'm enlightened. Yeah. But when we sit down, most of the time, we're far from enlightenment. So ego's got nothing to get into. No nutriment, no fuel for ego there. Have to let go. Oh yes, let go. Greed, hatred, delusion. Yep, there we are again. It's not me, it's not mine. But enlightenment, yeah, that's me all right. But we don't want the greed, aversion, delusion, do we? No. Leave it be. Let it go. So we do the practice and we see the results for ourselves. So that's up to each one of us to experience that for ourselves. And so I wish you all the best in your practice and see the results for yourself.